Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Dan Wickline Show. I am your host, Mobius M. Mobius, and please stop poking me. Ow, quit it. Ow, quit it. All right, we are, we're honored by a special guest today, who we'll be bringing on in just a few minutes, Russell Nolte, who's going to be with us, an amazingly and prolific author, who, as to quote his own post a few minutes yesterday, book 7 of the year done, 32 overall. It's kind of a show off at that point, I think, but it's damn impressive. All right, but yeah, he's in the back room, so I'm going to bring him out in just a minute. But before I do that, I do want to just talk about real quick the new episode of Loki. If you have not seen it, don't worry. I'm not going to do any spoilers. I am not going to tell you anything about the episode. If you are someone who thought the last episode was a little lacking, which I didn't, but if you did, you will be very pleased with this episode. It's quite the episode. A lot goes on. If you watched my broadcast yesterday, there was a couple things I said we probably would get in the episode, and surprisingly, we got a lot of it, one of which I was more joking about, and they did anyway. But the important thing for you to know is that there is a mid-credit scene that is very important. So when the credits start rolling, just listen to the music. It's a Patti LaBelle song, I believe. Enjoy it, watch the credits, see the changes. They add some new pictures in the background, stuff like that. And then you got a post-credit scene, which, again, is very, very important. It's a good episode. It is definitely, as I was saying yesterday, following the 3-act structure. We get the utter chaos and the big changes, and we're going to go speeding into the last act, which will be episodes 5 and 6. So make sure you watch it before too many people spoil it for you online, because they're going to do that. And tomorrow night, join me at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, where we will talk about the episode in all its spoilery glory. And you can come and join me and share your opinions and your response to what we see. So with that said, not doing any news today. There wasn't a whole lot other than things I don't necessarily want to cover, of people either going to or getting out of prison. So we will skip that for today and go right to our guest. He is a prolific writer, a good guy, a great person to meet at conventions and to see on panels. He is Russell Nolte, and he is joining us now. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. Quick behind the scenes here. I am going to be on vacation next week, so I am scrambling to put together a bunch of pre-recorded stuff for to cover next week. And I had just booked everything, and Russell said, "Hey, I finished my book early today. I've got tomorrow free. I could be on the show." I'm like, well, I've booked everything I need, but you could save my butt by coming on live so I don't have to do a lot of prep for the show tomorrow. And we could talk about the stuff you do. And he agreed. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. You're saving my bacon here. And so what book did you just wrap up, or are we not allowed to say that one yet?
So it's not a series that I've been talked about yet, but it's called Dragon Strife. It's the second book. So how I work is I work on 2 books series simultaneously. So I write one book series like January, and then another book series in February, and then go back to series 1 in March, and then series 2. And so I've found that my brain needs a month to decompress. And so I used to have just a month where I did nothing between books. But then my friend was like, if you really want to be prolific, not that I wasn't before, but she's like, you can try and do another series in the gap month, because like your brain will then still have that month to process what it's doing next in the one series, and you'll be able to kind of layer it together. And I thought that was bananas, but I tried it and it really worked well. I was able to still have the same impact in my main series, and then in my and then be able to pick up another book like in the off months. So this is not my Godsverse Chronicles series, which is my most popular book series, or the Obsidian Spindle Saga, which I just launched. It's sort of, I have a couple of sort of 3-book series that I have covers for, because I went cover mad like 3 years ago and bought like 50 covers. And so I decided, while I'm trying to figure out what the next thing is after the Godsverse Chronicles, I'm going to finally get rid of some of these covers by writing the books for them. And so Dragon Strife is about it's epic fantasy. Is the first time I've done that. It's about a girl who is set to be sacrificed in this world. Every 5 years, they have to provide a sacrifice to these dragon gods, and she is the sacrifice. She goes to be sacrificed. She's ready to die, and then the dragon says he doesn't kill people. He just and so she basically lives with this like commune of other women who haven't been sacrificed, and it's sort of about their struggle, to find a place in her world after her, she had this great destiny, right? Like her destiny was like save her town, and now she kind of has to figure out what she's going to do next after like her destiny has been kind of taken from her, and she still now has a lot of life left to go. And I very, very much identify with that kind of like, okay, I did the thing. Like I broke through. I became successful. And now like what? Like, is there a party? Is there a thing? And they're like, no, you just like, we don't like, do whatever thing you do now, but just do it for the next 40 years.
All right. I like that idea. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I spent my entire life going in one direction. Suddenly I find out there's nothing there, and now I got to find a new direction.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can relate to that, especially if you're in the creator or an entertainment industry.
Yes, I talk about this a lot. I feel like, there's like 3 steps to a creative career, kind of. There's like the breaking through. And like that's pretty easy. Like you're pushing against not easy, but like it's kind of easy to define what that is, right? You're like pushing, and like suddenly there's like that moment you're like, oh my God, like it worked. Like people are taking my calls now, people are buying my books, and that's great. And then there's that second step, which is like, oh crap, now I got to prove not a fluke. Now I got to like do the next part to kind of stabilize it. Yeah. And then after you're kind of, okay, I've done 5 or 6 big books, I've been doing this for a long time, and like, I'm probably going to be able to do it for a while longer if I don't completely screw everything up. There's the third stage, which is like existing as a creative human for the rest of your life. And there's no guidebook for that. There's no monumental like thing that happens. There's maybe a series of monumental like series or things that you do, but you're not like, I don't know, for years I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't know what the steps were. I just felt like I was floating in this like abyss of creativity with no real direction. which is beautiful, which is like a beautiful thing to be able to do. Don't get me wrong, but the book series kind of came out of that, like, oh, okay, I always wanted to be a creative person. I broke through. People take me seriously now. I've done a bunch of books. There are people buying my stuff whenever it comes out. Cool. Now, what is the next big leap that you have to take?
Makes sense. I mean, that's what I've always discovered, that it's not as hard to break in as it is to stay in.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not something you can define. You can get that one hit. I mean, you see it with music all the time too. That band that puts out that one great song, and then there's no second song.
Right.
But success as itself is kind of a bitch. I mean, I look at just yesterday there was a news story about George R.R. Martin, and he talked about how his ending for Game of Thrones is going to be different than the TV series. And when the TV series did its ending and got such negative flack, in my mind I thought, well, that was Martin going, well, here's one ending I had in mind. Let's see how it does.
Right.
Oh, God, that's okay. We'll do the other one,
Right.
Because when you start a series and you get, and now you're doing 3 series, you said. When you start a series, you kind of get, it's your baby. But after a while, it almost feels like it starts becoming the reader's baby.
Oh, absolutely.
And you want to keep them happy, because you're not writing it for you. When you write that first novel, no one knows about it, stuff like that. But when it comes time to book 5, book 7, I think of somebody like Jim Butcher who just put out book 17 or 18 of the Dresden Files, which is a phenomenal number in itself. You're no longer just doing it for yourself. You've got to keep all these fans happy, and they're not going to be, because not everybody is going to like everything you do. Have you started that part of it yet? I mean, I don't know how far along you are in the different series.
Oh, yeah. So the Godsverse Chronicles, I've written 11 books in. The last 4 are coming out in January. And I feel like the further you get in the series, the more chances you have to muck it up. And that's why I always feel, I call it Game of Thrones syndrome, where real good press, everyone loves it. Everyone kind of stops loving it after like 6, maybe 7, but then everyone hates it. And now we don't talk about Game of Thrones. And I feel like every installment in the series is more a juggling act than anything, because it's more like, I have to make this new and interesting while still making it feel like a series. There's I have a theory about why people don't like the Star Wars movie, because I like it. I like Star Wars, but I'm not like a fanatic on Star Wars. But I watched the movie. I think it's like the best Star Wars movie. But the fact is, it's not a Star Wars movie. It's a great movie. It may be a great movie, but it is not a Star Wars movie.
Okay.
It is a different thing. And the expectations that the fans have for a Star Wars movie have been set by the original trilogy and the Clone Wars show and all of these things. There's an expectation for what a Star Wars movie will be. And as good or bad as Last Jedi was, it did not fit into the mold of what they expected a Star Wars movie to be. It was new and it was original, and I think that it was well done, but it was not a Star Wars movie. And I feel that with writing every book in a series, that a series has a flow and a rhythm to it, and every series operates differently. And every time I move series from Godsverse to Obsidian Spindle or Ichabod, there's a template of what a story feels like in that world. And my job as a writer is to shepherd that universe along in a way that someone who has picked up the previous books will say, oh, this feels like a similar story that I can get lost in. It's not going to break the world, and it's not going to and it's not going to give me any surprises as far as structurally breaking the world. And I feel like the Gods vs. Chronicles, for instance, are like fantasy thrillers. They're really fast paced. Like they are. And I can tell a story with different points of view and different characters, but it has to maintain that kind of pace and rhythm. And the same thing with Obsidian Spindle Saga. It's much slower, and every book is every character has its own sort of fantasy story going. And I have to stay true to each of those stories and each of those characters, but that's different than an Ichabod Jones story. And the longer that you go in a series, I'm now writing my 10th book of the Obsidian Spindle Saga, and I just finished editing the 11th book of of the Gods vs. Chronicles. So every time I send a story off to my editor, my number one concern is not like, are people going to like it? It is this going to break the universe and make everyone hate it?
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. Well, you mentioned Last Jedi, and I think Last Jedi is a good example of what you were just talking about. And I agree with you in that Rian Johnson's motif is to subvert expectations. And when you're dealing with something, if he was just doing a sci-fi movie, he would have done fine. But because he was doing an established one with established characters that are well loved over 40, 50 years now, you can't really do that. But he could come in and do a pastiche of an Agatha Christie movie and get away with it because the characters are all new. You're not expecting them to act a certain way.
Right.
Where, and he could kind of turn things on its ear with Knives Out. But had they picked him to do Murder on the Orient Express, and he did that, I think people would have hated it because Hercule Poirot, you expect certain things from, but Benoit Blanc, nobody knows him at all.
Right.
So I think, at least for that, I think Last Jedi would have been better as a standalone sci-fi movie, would have been fine. But because it existed in the franchise,
and it took me a while to figure that out, of like listening to all of these things, and like there's and I think that is the hardest part of doing like having the breakout book. Like I'm interested to see how he does with like the second Knives Out movie, because there are now expectations, and like, is he going to subvert the expectations that like we had in the first movie, or is he going to continue the same motif that he had in the first thing? Because it's very hard to do a series well, and especially a long series well. I know you have a long series too, and do you have that same thing where every time, like, there's joy of like coming back to these characters, but my main thing is, please don't mess up this universe for everyone who's reading it.
Yeah, absolutely. There is that pressure, and it does. I agree. It does become more and more the bigger you build the universe, and the more people are watching it, because again, it's no longer your baby that you're just writing the story for yourself. You have people with expectations, and I think we saw that in the stuff we're getting from Marvel now. With WandaVision, I think more people had expectations, and why the ending got so, I don't know, there was a lot of people disappointed in the ending, not because the ending was bad, but because they had their own expectations on where things should have gone.
Right.
And I think we get that. A good friend of mine is a huge fan of the Wheel of Time series.
Right.
And she loves Robert Jordan. She loves Brandon Sanderson, who finished the series. His Mistborn books are her favorite. I mean, and I asked her one day, I said, so should I read The Wheel of Time? She's like, no, don't even get into it. I'm like, but you love this series. She goes, yes. As I was reading it, I was loving it. But as I got deeper into it, it just went places I didn't want it to go. And I'm like, it's weird for a fan point of view for that. And I think that is the one downside to trying to do a long series.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and But like on the other hand, it's wonderful to see someone who wants to invest in your world that many times over and is willing to buy book after book after book after book. And I think it's harder and harder over time for a creator to be the Stephen King who just does these like one-offs. I mean, he did do his series of Dark Tower, but yeah. I think that the more the time goes on and the more, you know, I think I read something like 4.5 million titles on Amazon for books. Like the more marketing you can put into something, which means the longer the series is, the more sell through it has, and the more chances you have to talk about it. So, for instance, you know, the Godsverse Chronicles. Well, I've been talking about that since 2015. You know, we did Katrina Hates the Dead. 2017, we did Pixie Dust. 2020, we released the first 4 books. Earlier this year, we released the next 3 books. September, we're releasing a new graphic novel in the Godsverse Chronicles. Then in January, I'm releasing the last 4 books in that series. So and then not only that, but a bunch of them haven't been on Amazon. So I have a whole nother launch. So like literally 5, 10, 15 times in my career, I'm going to be able to talk about this series and get new people excited about it. And that's something that you don't have when you're making Christine or like making like one book. And because you don't have the publishing establishment behind it, and because even now publishing companies generally aren't there for books like they were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, you end up having to have these long series for all of those reasons that I just talked about. And so that people can say, oh, there's 11 books in this series and it's done. Okay, like this is something I can commit to. And this is something the author clearly feels strongly about because he literally came back to it 10, 11, 29 times. Like my friend Jonas Salk just put out his 29th Sarah Roberts book.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive. Do you find, though, that there's some downside to that as well? That sometimes somebody looks at a series that's 10, 11, 12 books long, they think, well, that's just too much to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's 2 kinds. Oh, I always am that kind of person. Like, I don't like long series. I just feel like readers are not me. So I spent the beginning part of my career like writing a lot of standalone stuff. And the one thing I got all of the time was, where's the follow-up? Where's the follow-up? Where's the follow-up? Like, where's the next book in this series? Where's the next book in this series? And I was like, that's it. Like, there's no more. Like, people were upset by that. More like, it's funny because I would tell people at a show, I was like, this is it. This is all of the book. And they'd be like, cool. I was like, I don't have any plans to make new books. And they would be like, awesome. Then they would come back the next time they saw me and be like, where's the next book? I'm like, but I literally sold this to you on the premise that there was no more. And they're like, yeah, but I just figured you were lying. And like, there'd be another thing. So the whole Godsverse Chronicles came out of people saying that to me, just constantly saying, where's the next book? Where's the next book? Where's the next book? And honestly, wanting that series more than they wanted to buy other books that I had that were outside of that series. And so I found myself trying to convince somebody to buy Ichabod and then like buy Katrina. And some of them did buy both, but a lot of them were just like, no, I don't care. Like, is this another Katrina book? Is this another like Godsverse book? Yes, I'm in. But like, I don't want this other stuff, no matter how good it is.
Well, and that's definitely not something new, because that's what Arthur Conan Doyle went with Sherlock Holmes. He tried to kill the character off because he was tired of writing him. Yeah. And people just kept complaining and complaining until he brought him back. Yeah,
and he would put his quote up so high that like he didn't think anyone would match it, and people matched it. Like his family would like threaten to disown him if he wouldn't write more of the character. I mean, it's so funny because, you know, there's that statue of Sherlock Holmes outside of Arthur Conan Doyle's house, and like there was nothing in the world that he hated more than Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, it is, and but like there is the benefit of having a series is you can always write those singles. You can always write those single books, and then your ardent fans will buy them. But you have the series, which is sort of like your moneymaker. It's like, okay, I can exist. Like not that everything is the level of Harry Potter, because really nothing is, but like, it's a good example of like, hey, no matter what J.K. Rowling does in the rest of her life, like she can always get people into the Harry Potter series. There's always new readers looking for it. And there's always people aging into it. There's always people aging out of it that can bring people into it. There's always people that like are going to want the illustrated edition or the next cover, all of that stuff. And like, it's just so powerful. It's a power that I didn't understand until I started writing. My goal for the God's Verse was to write 1 million words in one series. And with the last book, we just went over 1 million. I just went over 1 million words. Like, it's like 1 million words and like 40,000 words or something like that. So it's just over that. But the power of being able to say for the rest of my life, well, you know, even if I give 3 away for free, there's still 8 more to like buy. Like, even if I drop $1,000 in here and like, you know, I lose money on the first book, all I need is like 5 out of 100 people to like read through the series or like whatever that thing is. It's always a chance to give yourself sort of a stability in a creative career that like lacks stability. There's no stability. The only stability is the career, is the stability that we make for it. And one of those things is to have, you know, artists who do like print series or photographers who do like photography studies that like last for a long time. Artists who like do my friend Jay Salvatore, who does the sad emo, super emo friends, you know, like that's his thing. And he does other things that are not super emo friends, but like the super emo friends are the thing that like keep the lights on and allow him to do all of that other stuff. And I'm all for making whatever thing you want and like taking a gamble. But I will say that if you go into a career thinking, okay, what is the signature piece that I'm going to be? Like, what is the thing that is going to bring me stability that I can like put a new book out and know it's going to make me money? Like, there's so much power that comes with that as a creative.
Absolutely. What is your definition of a book? Because I mean, you're cranking out, 7 books we're only in the 6th month of the year. So
it depends. The God's Verse books are between 80 and 90,000 words. The Dragon Strife books are short. They're about 50,000 words. They're more pulps. And then the Obsidian Spindles are about 60 to 65,000 words. So I wouldn't say any of them are like massively long, but I think that I used to think that a book was something between like 30 and 40,000 or above. But I think that by all accounts, going back to the beginning of books, 50,000 words and above is a book. And then like 90,000 words is like a big, thick book. And then 150,000 words is like an epic fantasy book.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anything under 50 is a novella. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. We're going to have to take a break here in a minute, but real quick, when we come back, what I want to talk about is your writing process and also the other side of it, because you are a promotion machine getting this stuff out there. So after the break, that's what I'd like to talk about, is just get an idea of your process for that. But Kyle, if you're ready, let's go ahead and take it to break, and we'll be right back. Of course, if Kyle's ready.
To be continued. 3 little words that hold the secret to the next great story. 3 words that will thrill you, confound you, give life to new possibilities. Every variation of To Be Continued is a promise of adventure, a promise of excitement, a promise of unseen wonders and unexplored worlds. A promise that every issue you read makes you a part of a never-ending journey. And behind every page, there will be an unopened door waiting for you. This story to be continued at your local comic book shop today. Visit comicshoplocator.com today.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Dan Wickline Show. We are talking to writer Russell Nolte, who is joining us here. When we went to the break, I was setting this up. I'd like to talk about your writing process. I know a handful of writers who are extremely prolific. They can crank out a 50,000 word book in no time at all. I'm usually pretty fast myself. I just spent this morning talking to Bobby Nash, who's another guy that can just speed through a book. You're cranking out, you said some of the books are 80, 90,000 words. Others are 50, some are 60. That's some big books. The 80, 90,000 ones are big books. How long does it take, and what is your process for doing a novel?
So a 50 to 60,000 word book takes me 3 weeks. 3 full weeks. Like, if I have to go to a show or if I have to take a day off, then it's 15 writing days to get from draft to the final edit where I send it was ready for my editor. And then that doesn't include a day, usually a few hours of doing a very basic outline. I found that over the years, my outlines have gotten more and more sparse because all I really care about in them is the big set piece moments. So I write the outlines to say, okay, here's where they're starting, here's how it's set up, and then here's how it's going to end. And so I'm writing it through just to talk where is the general ending of this piece of the puzzle going to be. Now with some books, like the 80 to 90,000 word books, like the Godsverse books, they end and they are a complete story. With the Obsidian Spindle Saga books, there's an overarching plot that goes across 4 books, and then there are little smaller wins that they have each book. So each series is different. So I spend a lot of time, probably about a year to 2 years, something around that time, just thinking about the series, how it's going to work, and what the guts of the series is going to be. What is an episode of the Obsidian Spindle Saga going to be? What is an episode of the Godsverse going to be? And then once I have that, and especially once I've written a book of it, I'm like, okay, this is how it's going to go. I now know what the bones are. Once I have the bones of what the series is going to be, it becomes a lot easier to go through, which is why singles are so hard for me now, because they're literally coming up with the process as I'm writing it and as I'm designing it. And so I'm like, is it really worth it to go through all of that time to design a book to get one book out of it? I'm less convinced of that now. When I could just continue to write in the same series or spin-off series or whatever. Then once I have a book, once I have the outline, I get up at 6 a.m. every morning. By 9 a.m., I am on the keyboard. I'm on my keyboard to write 5,000 words or edit 20,000 words. It takes me somewhere between 3 to 5 hours to do that, depending on the day and depending on how committed I am. Sometimes I'll just feel really good and I'll end up editing 50,000 words. I almost never write more than 5, sometimes 6, and very rarely 7,000 words. Sometimes when I have a day off, what I'll do is I'll just say, I need 6,000 words. If I'm going to take this day off, I need to do 6,000 words this day, because my goal is 25,000 words every week. And that is the only thing that I absolutely must do. I was talking with my wife yesterday. She's like, what do you like? She's like, I was like, I got a $10,000 grant that got into my bank account yesterday. I finished Ichabod. I did all of this other stuff, but I was like, I haven't accomplished anything today, because the thing that I have to accomplish is finishing this book. And like that is the one thing that I have to do every day. And when I'm launching a Kickstarter, sometimes I'll take the day that I launched the campaign off, but I'm right back on the keyboard the next day. And I tend to do Pomodoros of 1,000 words. So I'm a little bit, it's a little bit more lax now, but I used to do 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, or 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. It's a little bit more of a rhythm thing now that I have with my own body. I'll tend to I'll write a chapter and then I'll take a little bit of time off and then I'll come back. So that's every day. I finish by 2. I work out. I take the dogs for a walk. Then I read, and that's my day. That's my day, and that's every day. It's very boring, but it is a day that works. I think that that my creativity comes from the structure and the banality of that every day is the same, and I just know what I'm going to do. And I'm very worried about what happens in September when I start going back to shows again. Although this really came from shows, because it used to be that I would go to shows every weekend, and I had like 3 days, and I had to do 7 days of work in 3 days. And so now that I've had 5 days, it's like I'm just incredibly prolific, and because I'm now able to take that productivity, and instead of like stretching it out over 5 days, I'm just like, well, what if I just continue on, and what happens after 5 days of doing this?
So you find that doing the shows are important enough to take yourself away from the writing?
I'm going to be doing less shows moving forward, but yes, I think that some shows, especially when they are willing to guest me, are worth getting away from the keyboard, partially because it's just that fan interaction is like something you don't get. Like part of the reason why no, that's not true. The majority of the reason I write these books, aside from like my own mental health, is so that people read them. So to see that people have read them and are coming to my table to either buy the next one, or to buy the first one, or to just tell me that they enjoyed the books, is kind of the whole game for me. So I don't think that I will ever completely be away from shows, although I will admit the last 18 months have been lovely. What I will do is I will be much, 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 much more selective about my shows, just like I've become much, much, much more selective on the anthologies that I'm willing to say yes to.
Makes sense. Yeah. How do you structure your books? Now, I know when I sit down to write, you and I seem to have a very similar formatting. I do an outline. I always think of the book in thirds. And I focus on the first third, because for when I write, my stories tend to kind of swerve off, letting the characters kind of be the characters. Right. And then I spend the next, then the next third is kind of getting us back on track. And then, I know
similar.
End. So I focus on thirds, but, I tend to write chapters that are similar in size. I do about 2,500 word chapters, that type of thing. Do you have that type of structure, or are you a little more freeform?
No, I do. I definitely have that structure. And again, it changes between the series. So in the Gods vs. Chronicles books are literally written book 1, book 2, book 3. And even though the books are mostly continuous stories, I still have like book 1, book 2, book 3. And I focus on, so when I do an outline, even for a 90,000 word book, it ends up being, I'll dash off every 1,000, and it will be 1,000 up to 120,000. And so what generally happens is the 40,000 words get condensed into 30,000 words at each step. And so the Gods vs. books are between 1,500 and 2,500 words a chapter. And the Obsidian Spindle books are between 800 and 1,500 words a chapter. And I stick to that pretty regularly. And when I read, I prefer if the writers, unless it's a real important reason, stick to similarly sized chapters as well. Because again, I am trying to maintain reader expectations.
Now, a lot of what writers do are things that they figure out along the way. Again, my formatting and stuff. I never was like in a panel or something where, somebody said, oh, this is how I do it. And I went, oh, I'll take notes. It's something I figured out as I went. And I'm assuming it's something you did as well.
I can bring mine back. I believe it's Michael Moorcock's Write a Book in 3 Days. And that is the outline that I've used for like all of my books since 2017. It's a very simple format. I took what he's like, this is when this beat happens. And this is when this beat happens. And I literally wrote it on my paper that this, now I'm more organic with that now, but I used to take me a year to write a book. And the reason that I can do that is, I believe it's Michael Moorcock's. It's on Ghostwoods is where I found it. And it was how to write a book in 3 days. And I would not write a book in 3 days because that sounds horrible, but it does allow me to write a book in a month by kind of following the same structure. And I'm a structure guy. Like I love the characters, my most important thing, but I'm a structure guy. Like if I don't have, like, I'm very good at the bones of the book and bones of whatever story it is and breaking that down so that like it continually does the thing that I need it to do.
All right. So now I've got the question that, do you ever suffer writer's block?
No, I do not.
Do you think it's because of the structure you write with?
I think it is because I spend so much time developing the world that I know that I love it. Now, I think that writer's block often comes from either writing yourself into a corner and just needing to take a break, because like it's just like I have no idea how to get out of this corner. That's like the good writer's block. But the bad writer's block comes from when you're either burnt out because you've just been writing too much, or your life is just too much and you can't get in the good headspace, or you don't love the project and you should probably abandon it. That's what, at least in my career, that is what writer's block is. One of those three things is what writer's block has always meant. And so because I spend so much time in the world before I even start, and because I have a habit of, I developed a habit of finishing things, because this is a thing that I don't think writers always develop well enough, which is like, if you're a person who finishes things, you just become a person who finishes that thing. And if you are a person who finishes it in a month, you end up being the person who finishes that book in a month. I'm not saying there are not other kinds of writer's block, but those are the kinds of writer's block that I almost always see.
So what was your first novel experience? How did you write your first novel before you had these tools and these structures that you use now? What was that first experience like?
The book was called Gumshoes, The Case of Madison's Father. It was a mystery novel. And the reason I chose a middle grade mystery novel, and the reason I chose it was because I'd been written a lot of movie scripts. And movie scripts are incredibly formulaic, like as far as like what happens and like breaking things in scenes and acts and things. And so I was not good at prose. I was good at, nebulously good at writing movie scripts. But I wanted to write something that had a very simple plot structure and structure of the sentences. Like literally just like I wanted the expectation for sentences to be short and to the point. And so I chose that. And then what I did was I broke down every chapter into 4 sections, and each section was between 250 and 300 words. And every chapter became 1,000 words. And then by that, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to get up today. I'm going to write 4 250 word chunks. And by the end of a month, I had the book done. And because middle grade is so much shorter, it was a 30,000 word book, or 35,000, and like that's a book in middle grade. And then and because it was a mystery novel, and this is what I mystery and romance are like the best 2 categories for an author to start with, because they are structured. They are incredibly structured. They all happen roughly the same way. And the more you can have that structure at the beginning to say, okay, because I think that the one other the other kind of writer's block is like I'm just nebulously in a thing, and I've seen this line in fantasy. They're just like I don't know, like they have to walk for like 500 miles to Mordor, and like I guess things happen, and like because you don't know what the next step is. But with mystery, there's always there's the introduction of the detective, and then there's the case, and then there's the misdirection, and then there's the clue, and then there's the false confession, the false accusation, and then there's the other clue, and it like all ends with a romance. It's like introducing the characters. There's a meet cute. There's a first date. There's like it all goes in the same order, and you always can come back on track. Now I don't have to be on those rails, although I do tend to try and keep my beats at like every 5,000 and 10,000 words, something like big happens. But with a new writer, mystery is so, it's not easy. Like I'm not saying it's easy to write a mystery, because it is not. But what it does is it takes the guesswork out of what the structure should be. Because while you're reading it, you're like, hey, it's been 7,000 words and I haven't even introduced the detective yet. Maybe that's a problem. Oh, this is a 50,000 word book and we're 15,000 words in and we still haven't had the case. We should probably like have it like instead of being lost in this sea of fantasy or sci-fi or women's fiction or like whatever the big category is, like just doing that. I'm not saying it has to be your favorite category. I'm not saying you have to make a career doing it. I'm saying like if you're at the beginning of your career, those kind of having that kind of bullet pointed structure. And I talk about comics a lot too. Like comics is great because comics is like, hey, every 20 to 26 pages, that's an issue. So you got to break it. You got to have a break there. Then you've got to have a break halfway through. Every 2-page spread, every 2 pages has to have a break. You know, you have to when you do the page turn, you want to have the reveal on the right. There's all these rules to it, and by knowing the rules, you can then break the rules. But so many writers don't even want to learn the rules that it becomes hard to not be awash in a sea of what do I do next.
Yeah. Now, your books you self-publish mostly, right?
Yep, I published in my company, Wannabe Press.
Right. All right. So how do you do that? Because that's what you can sit down, write a book, get an editor, put it together, put a cover on it, put it out there on Amazon. You can go to cons and you can still not get enough people to pick it up without, being able to do another book and make it a career. You've made a career out of it. So you've got the marketing touch. You've got that. So what are some of the things that you do to get your book noticed in a sea of 400 million books on Amazon and, tables and tables at conventions and stuff?
Well, the nice thing about conventions and Kickstarter, which are the two things that I do, is they're self-selecting out most of your competition. Like Stephen King is probably not going to come to your convention. So like you are theoretically could be the most successful author at that convention. There's probably going to be, but there's certainly going to be a small selection of maybe 200 or 300 authors at that show, which sounds like a lot, but it is a lot less than 4.5 million books. So one of the things that I tell people is like, you want to go places where you can stand out. And you can, like a Kickstarter, again, you're not going to be competing with Stephen King. Maybe Brandon Sanderson will be on there one time, but like these are people that are not coming to the platform often. So even when you're talking about like Kickstarter for comics, there's just like, you are not competing with like everyone who writes for Marvel. Like you may be competing, there may be other books that are written by Marvel people or DC people there, but it is not like having to compete with, you're not competing with Winter Soldier. Like you're not competing with those. So always try to like find the areas that you can, if not be the best, be among like the elite. Then I'm gonna tout my books because like I see this all the time. Like the books just are not good. Like the books are not like the art is not good inside of them. The covers are not good. The blurbs are not good. Like you have to, like when people open my books, I remember this at the beginning of my career and I did not understand it, but they were like, wow, like the art is really good in here. And I'm like, well, yeah, like I hired an artist and like, I wanted to make sure it was impressive when people open it, so they would never see that like this does not look like it was done by Marvel or DC. Like I knew the thing that got me into comics in the first place was I picked up my manager at the time give me stacks of independent comics, and I was like, a lot of them published by just a guy or a woman, and I was like, whoa, these look as good as anything that exists. Like, what is? And then and like that got my wheels turned to be like, wow, with like a minimal investment compared to a movie, you could make something that is of Marvel or DC caliber. Now, our books have a different style or stylized differently than Marvel or DC books, but like they are every bit the artistic quality, I believe, of those kind of books. Or top shelf or any of the IDW. Like I would put my books against any of them, and I think that is the most important thing. You cannot go to 100 conventions and sell your books if your books and sell your books to the level that you need to make a career of it if you have not invested in those books at the beginning. Now, I am not a genius when it comes to this. I hired artists that made me feel like I was out of my league. And like that they could bring something to the book that I could not. And that is, and then you have to package it with a good cover, like a good professionally done cover, a well-written blurb. And like, it has to look like, one thing that people don't think about for novels is like, it also has a look. Like you do not want to have the infinite jest problem of like 50 pages that just look like one block of text, or you have to make it look visually interesting, even if it's a novel, because people will pick it up and flip through it and they'll read the first page and they'll make a decision at a convention. On Kickstarter, they'll probably read like a chapter and say, oh, this is good. So you have to make something really that is objectively good, even if it's not subjectively your jam. And that is the biggest thing I tell people is a book does not have to be your jam for it to be good. I do not like Game of Thrones, the books, but I can appreciate that they are great works of art. For people that connects with, awesome. So that you do not want to lose people. And when people see that the package is professional, they're going to say, oh, well, like, sure, I can give this a shot. But like, if it's not, like, they're not going to give it a shot. Or like some might give it a shot and be pleasantly surprised, but they're not going to be like you don't want to say, oh, this is an indie book. It's the most important thing. And then two is we talked about so objectively good and subjectively your jam. People get so upset that people don't like their book, but if it's objectively good, then there's a market for it. So you have to then, instead of searching for literally everyone in the world, like you have to find your people, the people who are going to resonate with your book, with your outlook on life, and then those are the people you should be creating for forever. Really, I mean, like I have a very small network comparatively. Our last Kickstarter that did for the novels had 300 people. The last one for Ichabod had 475. My biggest one ever had a little over 1,000. Like that is not a huge, massive success on the book scale, but like those people keep coming back over and over and over and over and over again. And so your books have to be good. You have to focus on finding the humans and then growing those people and saying, okay, I have to admit that like out of every 100 people, 99 of them are not going to be the people. And I have to be willing to suffer through the rejection of the 99 to find that one. And then once you've done that, because I know a lot of people want to like write romances and sci-fi and 1,000 different things. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to find a new audience for each of those things. And it ends up being exhausting. And so if you can just find that one audience and say, and the longer it goes, the more important this is, because if you've now got 10 series you have to support, Well, if all of those are supporting one fan base, then everyone who comes back can be like, oh, Godsverse, oh, Obsidian Spindle, oh, Cthulhu is hard to spell, oh, like they can just keep, and they can keep like it's this virtuous sales cycle where they just keep coming in and then going back out and finding more of your work. But if your work is all over the place, then you're going to get people who like Sorry for Existing and don't like the Obsidian Spindle saga, and you have wasted a lot of that the time that you spent growing that audience. So it really is, for me, about making a great product, finding the people who are suffering through all of the people who won't like your book to find the couple that love it, and then once you have that sort of chain, then you can work on finding more and more and more and more people who like it through how you design your next series and everything else. That's a small 5-7 minute like crash course on the easiest, and none of this is easy and none of this is simple, but like the product, having a great product and an audience to read it is the like, that's the holy grail. Like, what if you can have that, and you can have that a dozen times, like you then have a career.
All right. Well, we're going to be wrapping it up here, but where is the best place for people to find your work? I see you've got russellnolte.com on your name there, but is that the best place? Is there any other place they should follow you at?
Yeah, that's the best place. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I will, for people that are listening to this feed, our new book, Black Market Heroine, is coming out in 2 months from now, and it's set in the Godsverse. It's about a criminal who accidentally saves the Antichrist and has to keep her alive till until sunset, so that she is not sacrificed to open a door to hell. And you can get a preview of the first 10 pages of that book at russellnolte.com/BMH.
All right. Thank you for coming on. It's been a fun time talking to you. We will have you back in September when your next book is Kickstarter is kicking off. So we'll talk about folks then. So you will definitely see Russell again. Join me tomorrow night here on The Experience for our spoiler review of Loki, where you guys can come and talk about your stuff. Please follow us on The Experience at Instagram and TikTok at _experience1. And I think it's the _experience1. And of course, comicshoppingexperience.com to join our mailing list. The _experience1. Yeah, or EXP1. All right, stay tuned for Comics Collectibles with Rex. And I think Nick. Is Nick back, Kyle?
It's Rex and the Not Nicks.
Rex and the Not Nicks, right. So up next is the Comic Collectibles with Rex and the Not Nicks. And you guys have a great evening. I will see you all tomorrow night. Thank you again, Russell. It's been a pleasure. And everyone, have a good time. Take it easy.